Bear cub was dangling from a cliff edge above a canyon. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The sky was turning orange as the sun began to set over Pine Ridge Canyon. Sarah and Tom Parker had just finished setting up their tent at the campsite, perched near the edge of the massive canyon. Their 6-month-old daughter, Lily, lay on a thick blanket nearby, fascinated by the dancing shadows of tree branches above her. She cooed and reached her tiny hands toward the sky, completely unaware of the drama that was about to unfold just yards away. Tom stacked firewood while Sarah unpacked their cooler. "I think we've got the best spot in the whole campground," Tom said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Look at that view." The canyon stretched before them like a painting, its red and brown walls catching the last golden rays of sunlight. Far below, a thin river snaked its way through the rocks, looking almost like a blue thread from this height. "Lily seems to love it here," Sarah replied, glancing at their baby, who was now rolling slightly to her side, her attention caught by something moving near the cliff edge. A small brown bear cub had wandered away from the forest and was sniffing around the rocks at the canyon's rim. Its mother was nowhere in sight. The cub's dark fur blended with the shadows, making it nearly invisible against the darkening landscape. It moved with the clumsy curiosity of youth, pawing at beetles and investigating interesting scents. Lily made a soft gurgling sound, her eyes following the cub's movements. The little bear looked up briefly, its ears twitching at the sound of the baby, before continuing its exploration of the cliff edge. "Did you remember to pack the extra blankets?" Sarah asked, her back turned to both Lily and the cliff as she organized their supplies. "They're in the car," Tom answered, heading toward their vehicle parked several yards away. "I'll grab them now before it gets completely dark." Neither parent noticed the bear cub inching closer to the crumbling edge of the canyon, nor did they see how intently their baby was watching the small animal. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and dust across the campsite. The cub stepped onto a section of rock that had been weakened by recent rains. There was a soft cracking sound, barely audible over the wind, and then a shower of pebbles cascaded down into the canyon. The bear cub yelped in surprise as the ground gave way beneath its front paws. In a heart-stopping moment, the little bear slid forward, scrabbling desperately with its back legs as the front half of its body dangled over the edge of the cliff. Its small claws scraped against the rock, finding just enough purchase to keep from falling, but not enough to pull itself back up to safety. The cub's frightened cries echoed across the canyon. High-pitched and desperate, they cut through the peaceful evening air like a knife. Lily stopped moving. Her baby blue eyes widened at the sound. She rolled completely onto her stomach now, pushing herself up on her chubby arms, her gaze fixed on the struggling cub. Something in the animal's cries seemed to resonate with her in a way her parents could never understand. "This breeze is getting chilly," Sarah commented, still focused on unpacking. "Tom, can you check on Lily while I finish this? Make sure her hat's still on." But Tom was at the car, digging through bags for the extra blankets, too far away to hear Sarah over the rising wind. The bear cub's cries grew more frantic as its grip began to weaken. One paw slipped, sending another shower of pebbles into the abyss below. The cub let out a sound that was eerily similar to a human child's cry of fear. Lily's face scrunched up, her own distress rising in response to the cub's. She began to rock forward on her blanket, her little body moving with newfound purpose. Though she had never crawled more than a few inches before, something was driving her forward now, Off her blanket and onto the rough ground she went, her tiny hands gripping the dirt and grass as she inched toward the sound of the cub's cries. Her pink cotton hat fell off, caught by the wind and carried away. But Lily didn't stop. The cub's strength was failing. Its back legs scrambled against the loose dirt at the edge of the cliff, but it was losing the battle against gravity. Another paw slipped, and now the cub was hanging by just one set of claws, its small body dangling over the enormous drop. Sarah finally sensed something was wrong. She turned, expecting to see Lily on her blanket, but instead saw only an empty space where her baby should have been. "Lily?" Her voice rose with sudden panic. "Tom, where's Lily?" Tom spun around at the car, blankets clutched in his arms. His eyes scanned the campsite until they locked onto the impossible sight of their 6-month-old daughter crawling steadily toward the cliff edge, toward the struggling bear cub. "Lily!" he screamed, dropping everything and breaking into a sprint. Sarah followed his gaze and let out a cry of pure terror. She too began running, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Lily was just feet away from the cliff edge now, still moving toward the desperate cries of the bear cub. The dying sunlight caught in her wispy blonde hair, creating a golden halo around her determined little face. What happened next would forever change the lives of everyone present at Pine Ridge Canyon that evening. Tom's legs had never moved so fast in his life. The distance between him and his crawling daughter seemed impossibly long. Sarah was closer, but she had frozen for a split second in disbelief before her maternal instincts kicked in. Now she raced across the campsite, her heart feeling like it might burst from terror. "Lily, stop!" she screamed, though she knew her baby couldn't understand the command. The bear cub let out its loudest cry yet, a sound of pure desperation as its last bit of grip began to fail. Its small black eyes were wide with fear, its tiny body trembling with the effort of holding on. Lily had reached the edge of the cliff now, just inches from where the ground crumbled away. She sat up, balancing precariously on her bottom, and reached one chubby hand toward the struggling cub. Her innocent face showed no fear of the deadly drop just beyond her toes, only concern for the frightened animal. "Oh God, oh God!" Tom chanted as he ran, sure he was about to witness the most horrible moment of his life. Just then, a low growl rumbled from the tree line. The mother bear had returned, and the sight that greeted her made her lurch forward with protective fury. Her cub dangling from a cliff, a human child reaching toward it, and 2 adult humans rushing toward the scene. It was a confusing tableau of danger from the bear's perspective. "Tom, the mother bear!" Sarah screamed, pointing toward the massive animal now charging across the campsite. Tom faltered in his sprint, torn between 2 deadly dangers, his baby at the cliff edge and an angry mother bear racing toward them all. In that moment of hesitation, something completely unexpected happened. Lily made a sound. Not a cry or a laugh or any of the typical baby noises her parents had grown accustomed to. Instead, she produced a soft, rumbling coo that mimicked the bear's own communication. A sound no human baby should know how to make. The mother bear slowed, her massive head tilting in confusion. The cub responded to Lily's strange call with a desperate whimper. Lily reached further, her fingers just brushing the fur on top of the cub's head. Then, with a strength that seemed impossible for her tiny body, she grabbed hold of the cub's ear and pulled. Sarah had reached Lily now, lunging to grab her baby before she could be dragged over the edge. But what she saw made her gasp. Lily wasn't being pulled down. Instead, somehow, the bear cub was inching upward. The baby's pull, combined with the cub's renewed struggle to survive, was actually helping it find purchase on the rock face. Tom reached them a second later, ready to snatch his daughter away from danger, but Sarah put her hand on his arm. "Wait," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Look." The cub's front paws found solid ground again. With a desperate scramble, it pulled itself back onto the ledge, flopping onto the solid earth just as Lily released her grip on its ear. The baby immediately broke into delighted giggles, clapping her hands as if applauding the cub's escape from death. The mother bear had stopped her charge about 15 feet away, watching the scene with wary confusion. Her cub was safe, but it was sitting unnervingly close to a human child and 2 adult humans. Every instinct told her to attack, to protect her young, but something held her back. Lily turned her head and looked directly at the mother bear. Again, she made that strange rumbling sound, so eerily similar to the bear's own communication. The mother bear huffed, then stepped forward cautiously. "Don't move," Tom whispered, inching his hand slowly toward Lily. "Maybe she'll just take her cub and leave." But before he could reach his daughter, a new sound broke the tense silence, a deeper, more threatening growl from further in the woods. A massive male bear, nearly twice the size of the mother, emerged from the trees. His scarred face and aggressive posture immediately signaled danger. Male bears were known to kill cubs that weren't their own, and this one had clearly caught the scent of the mother and her cub. "There's another bear," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. The male bear let out a roar that echoed across the canyon, a clear challenge to everyone present. The mother bear responded with a defensive stance, placing herself between the male and her cub, but that positioned her closer to the humans. Lily, seemingly oblivious to the growing danger, continued to play with the bear cub, who had now rolled onto its back like a puppy, apparently charmed by the strange human baby. "We need to get her away from there," Tom said through gritted teeth. But if we move too suddenly... The standoff was interrupted by the sound of a truck engine. Headlights swept across the campsite as a forest ranger's vehicle pulled up to the area. The male bear hesitated, then backed away slightly at this new development. A tall woman in a ranger uniform stepped out, immediately assessing the scene with trained eyes. She reached slowly back into her truck and pulled out what looked like a tranquilizer gun. "Don't make any sudden movements," she called to Sarah and Tom, her voice steady and authoritative. "My name is Ranger Elena Martinez. I'm going to help you." The mother bear was now torn between multiple threats: the male bear, the humans, and now this new arrival. Her cub, however, seemed perfectly content next to Lily, who was still making those strange rumbling sounds that seemed to keep the cub calm. "That's the strangest thing I've ever seen," Ranger Martinez murmured, carefully positioning herself for a clear shot at the male bear, who posed the most immediate threat. The male bear suddenly charged, but not toward the humans, toward the mother and her cub. The mother rose up on her hind legs with a roar that shook the leaves on the trees. Sarah took the opportunity to lunge forward and scoop up Lily, quickly backing away from both the cliff edge and the bears. The cub cried out as Lily was taken away, and to everyone's astonishment Lily cried out too, with the same pitch and intonation as the bear cub. Ranger Martinez fired her tranquilizer dart, hitting the male bear in the shoulder. He slowed but didn't stop his charge, colliding with the mother bear in a violent clash of claws and teeth. The 2 massive animals rolled dangerously close to the cliff edge, sending rocks and dirt cascading into the canyon. "Get to your car, now!" the ranger shouted, reloading her tranquilizer gun. Tom grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her toward their vehicle, Lily still clutched tightly in her arms. But the baby was fighting now, reaching back toward the bear cub, making distressed noises that mirrored the cub's own cries. The male bear was slowing down as the tranquilizer began to take effect, but not before he'd pushed the mother dangerously close to the cliff edge. The cub, seeing its mother in danger, ran toward the fight, directly into the path of the struggling adults. "The cub!" Sarah gasped, watching in horror as it narrowly avoided being crushed between the two large bears. Suddenly, a second ranger appeared from the trees, this one carrying a flare gun. He fired a bright red flare that exploded above the bears, temporarily distracting them from their fight. "This way," the second ranger called to the family. "We've got a safer position set up." Tom pulled Sarah toward the voice, but she was looking back over her shoulder at the unfolding scene. The mother bear had regained her footing away from the cliff edge, but the male, disoriented by both the tranquilizer and the flare, was stumbling dangerously close to the drop. The cub was caught in the middle, trying to reach its mother while avoiding the male. In its confusion, it backed right up to the crumbling edge again. Lily screamed, not a normal baby cry, but a sound that exactly matched the mother bear's earlier roar. The sound was so shocking, so impossible coming from a human baby, that everyone, even the bears, seemed to freeze for a moment. In that strange, suspended second, Ranger Martinez made a decision. Instead of firing at the male bear again, she leapt forward with incredible bravery, scooped up the bear cub, and rolled away from the cliff edge. The male bear, fighting the effects of the tranquilizer, turned toward this new threat. He rose up on his hind legs, towering over the ranger who was clutching the frightened cub. The mother bear charged, not at the ranger but at the male. She hit him with such force that both bears tumbled over the cliff edge in a terrible, silent moment that seemed to stretch forever. Sarah buried Lily's face against her chest, turning away from the horrific scene. Tom stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. The second ranger shouted something into his radio, his face pale with shock. Ranger Martinez remained crouched on the ground, the bear cub trembling in her arms, both of them staring at the spot where the adult bears had disappeared. Then came the sound, a splash and thrashing from far below. The canyon had a river at its base, swollen from recent rains. The bears had landed in the water, not on the rocks. "They're alive," the second ranger called, looking through binoculars. "At least they're moving." The male bear was struggling to swim, clearly affected by the tranquilizer, but the mother was already making her way to the shore. The deadly fall had somehow been transformed into a survivable drop thanks to the deep spring waters of the river. Ranger Martinez stood slowly, still holding the frightened cub. "We need to get this little one down to its mother," she said. "There's a path about half a mile down that leads to the canyon floor." Lily was squirming in Sarah's arms, still reaching toward the bear cub, still making those impossible sounds. Her parents exchanged a look of bewilderment mixed with awe. "What just happened?" Tom asked, his voice breaking. What was she doing?" Ranger Martinez looked at the baby with new interest. "I've been working with bears for 15 years, she said slowly. "And I've never seen anything like what your daughter just did. It was like she was talking to them." The second ranger approached, still looking shaken. "The rescue team is heading to the river to check on the bears," he said. "And there's something else you all should know." He hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "This isn't the first strange incident we've had here recently." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, finally finding her voice. She was clutching Lily tightly, as if afraid her baby might somehow transform into something she didn't recognize. "There's been talk among the local tribes," the ranger said. "Their elders have been coming to the canyon for weeks now, saying the spirits are restless. They claim the barrier between humans and animals is thinning." He shook his head. "I never put much stock in those stories, but after what I just saw—" Ranger Martinez cut him off with a sharp look. "Let's focus on getting these folks to safety and this cub back to its mother," she said firmly. The legends can wait. As they walked toward the ranger's truck, Tom put his arm around Sarah's shoulders. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Sarah looked down at Lily, who had calmed now and was watching the bear cub over her mother's shoulder with intelligent eyes that suddenly seemed too knowing for a 6-month-old baby. "I don't know," she whispered. "Did you hear those sounds she was making?" That wasn't normal, Tom." Tom swallowed hard. "I know, but she saved that cub's life. Somehow our baby did that." They reached the ranger's truck, and Ranger Martinez carefully placed the bear cub in a large animal carrier in the back. Lily immediately reached toward it, making a soft whimpering sound that the cub answered with an identical cry. "We need to take the cub down to its mother," Ranger Martinez explained. "You folks should probably head home. We can take your statement tomorrow at the ranger station." "Actually," Tom said, looking at his daughter's face, "I think we need to come with you." "That's not standard procedure," the second ranger began, but Ranger Martinez interrupted him. "Nothing about this situation is standard," she said. She studied Lily's face for a long moment, then nodded. "You can follow us in your car. The path is rough, but if you have a decent vehicle, you should make it." As they walked back to their own car, leaving the rangers to pack up their equipment, Sarah whispered to Tom, "Do you think we should tell them about the dreams?" Tom glanced around to make sure no one could hear them. "Not yet," he murmured. "Let's see what happens with the bears first." Sarah nodded, remembering the strange dreams she'd been having throughout her pregnancy. Dreams of running through forests on all fours, of cubs playing in mountain streams, of dens dug into hillsides. Dreams she'd never told anyone about, not even Tom, until after Lily was born and the baby had started showing unusual behaviors. The way she would sniff at new people instead of looking at them. How she would hibernate sleep for unusual lengths of time. The strange guttural sound she sometimes made when excited. They had told themselves it was nothing. Just new parent anxiety making them imagine connections that weren't there. But after tonight, after seeing their baby communicate with bears in their own language, they couldn't deny it anymore. Something very unusual was happening with their daughter, and they had a feeling that heading down into that canyon was just the beginning of a much stranger journey than they could have imagined. The drive down the winding dirt road into the canyon was tense and silent. Tom gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, following the ranger's truck at a careful distance. The headlights carved yellow tunnels through the darkness, occasionally illuminating the eyes of small animals watching from the brush. In the back seat, secured in her car seat, Lily was unnaturally quiet. She stared out the window with an intensity that seemed impossible for an infant, her gaze fixed on the carrier visible in the back of the ranger's truck. "She's still watching that cub," Sarah whispered, twisting in her seat to check on their daughter. "Tom, I'm scared." Tom reached over and squeezed her hand. "I know. But whatever's happening, she's still our Lily." Sarah nodded, but doubt flickered across her face. "Do you remember what Dr. Abernathy said at her last checkup about her unusual development?" "He said she was advanced for her age," Tom replied, carefully navigating a particularly steep section of the road. "No, the other thing, about her brainwave patterns during the EEG." Tom frowned. They had taken Lily for tests after she'd had what they thought was a seizure, her body going rigid, her eyes rolling back. But the doctor had said it wasn't a seizure at all. It was something else, something he couldn't quite identify. He said they were organized in a pattern he'd never seen before, Tom remembered. But he didn't think it was dangerous. He also said the patterns were more similar to adult patterns, I remember. Tom's voice was tight. "But that doesn't explain this." The ranger's truck had stopped ahead. They had reached the canyon floor, a wide, rocky area bordered by the rushing river. The water level was higher than usual, splashing against boulders that normally stood well above the waterline. Tom parked behind the truck and turned off the engine. In the sudden silence, they could hear the river and, more distantly, a low moaning sound that raised the hair on the backs of their necks. "Is that?" Sarah began. "The mother bear," Ranger Martinez confirmed, approaching their car. Her uniform was dirty now, smudged with earth and what looked like blood on one sleeve. "She made it to shore about a quarter-mile downstream. She's injured, but alive." "And the male?" Tom asked, getting out of the car. "Also alive, but the tranquilizer finally took full effect. He's unconscious on the opposite bank. We'll relocate him when the rest of the team arrives with proper equipment." Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt but hesitated before getting out. "Is it safe to bring Lily down here?" Ranger Martinez's expression was unreadable. "Normally, I'd say absolutely not, but after what happened up there..." She glanced at Lily through the car window. "I think your daughter might be the key to making this situation safer, not more dangerous." The second ranger approached, carrying the animal carrier with the bear cub inside. "Elena, I really don't think this is a good idea. If the mother charges..." "She won't," Ranger Martinez said with surprising certainty. "Not with her cub at stake and not with..." She gestured toward Lily. "This goes against every protocol," the male ranger insisted. "Write me up if you want, Jake, but I know what I saw up there." She turned back to Tom and Sarah. "Your daughter connected with these bears somehow. I can't explain it, but I've worked with wildlife long enough to know when something extraordinary is happening." Jake shook his head, but didn't argue further. He set the carrier down on the ground about 50 yards from where they had parked. Sarah got out of the car and opened the back door to unbuckle Lily. The baby immediately reached toward the carrier, making that strange rumbling sound again. "She wants to be near the cub," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. Ranger Martinez nodded. "Let's move carefully. Stay behind me. And if I tell you to get back to the car, don't hesitate." They walked slowly toward the carrier, where the cub was pacing and whimpering. About 100 yards beyond, they could see the dark shape of the mother bear, lying on her side at the river's edge. Her breathing was labored, and even from this distance they could see a gash along her flank that glistened wetly in the moonlight. "She broke some ribs in the fall, and she's got a deep cut," Ranger Martinez explained quietly. "Normally, we'd tranquilize her to treat those injuries, but in her weakened state, that could kill her." "So, what's the plan?" Tom asked, holding Sarah's elbow supportively as she carried Lily. "We release the cub, let it go to her. Then we back away and let nature take its course." "That's it?" "But she's hurt," Sarah protested. "Wild animals are remarkably resilient, and we'll monitor her from a distance, intervene if absolutely necessary." They reached the carrier. Lily was practically lunging from Sarah's arms now, reaching for the metal gate that separated her from the bear cub. The cub responded by pressing its nose against the grate, sniffing eagerly at the baby's fingers. "Okay, here's what we're going to do," Ranger Martinez said, taking a small remote from her pocket. "This is a remote release for the carrier door. I'm going to open it from a safe distance. The cub should run straight to its mother." They backed away about 20 feet. Lily began to fuss, struggling in Sarah's arms. "Shh, baby, it's okay," Sarah soothed. But Lily's fussing turned to full-blown cries that soon transformed into those bear-like moans that sent chills down everyone's spines. The mother bear's head lifted at the sound. Though clearly in pain, she responded with a similar call that echoed across the canyon floor. "She's calling to your baby," Jake said incredulously. "Not to her cub, to your baby." Ranger Martinez pressed the button on the remote. The carrier door swung open, but to everyone's surprise, the cub didn't immediately run out. It poked its head out cautiously, looked directly at Lily, then at its mother, as if unsure which way to go. "This isn't right," Jake muttered. "It should be running straight to its mother." Lily's cries grew more insistent. She twisted in Sarah's arms, nearly falling to the ground in her struggle to get free. "I don't know if I can hold her," Sarah gasped, trying to maintain her grip on the squirming baby. "Let her down," Ranger Martinez said suddenly. "What?" Tom stepped forward protectively. "No way. That's a wild animal, and there's an injured mother bear just yards away." "Trust me," the ranger insisted. "Your daughter's trying to tell us something. I've never seen a bear cub hesitate like this when its mother is calling." "She's a baby. She doesn't know what she's doing," Tom argued. But even as he spoke, Lily's cries changed again, becoming lower, more rhythmic. The cub responded by cautiously stepping fully out of the carrier and sitting on its haunches, watching Lily with an unnerving intensity. Sarah looked at her daughter's face, at the determination and intelligence in those eyes that suddenly seemed too old, too knowing for a 6-month-old child, and made a decision. "I'm putting her down," she said firmly. "Sarah, no," Tom began, but Sarah had already knelt and placed Lily on the soft earth of the canyon floor. Instead of crawling toward the bear cub as everyone expected, Lily turned and looked up at the adults. She made a series of short, sharp sounds, then pointed deliberately toward the injured mother bear. Is she trying to tell us something?" Jake asked, his earlier skepticism fading in the face of this impossible behavior. Ranger Martinez knelt beside Lily, her trained eyes studying the baby's face. "What is it? What are you trying to show us?" Lily pointed again at the mother bear, then made a pawing motion at her own side, exactly where the bear's injury was located. Then she looked at the first aid kit hanging from Ranger Martinez's belt and reached for it with surprising coordination. "I think," Ranger Martinez said slowly, "she wants us to help the mother bear." "That's impossible," Jake said automatically, but his voice lacked conviction. 20 minutes ago I would have agreed with you," Ranger Martinez replied. She looked at Tom and Sarah. "Your daughter saved that cub's life up on the cliff. Now I think she's trying to save the mother too." Tom ran a hand through his hair, his world tilting on its axis. This can't be happening. Sarah, however, was watching Lily with growing wonder rather than fear. "Remember when she was 3 months old, and that stray dog came to our back door, the one that had been hit by a car?" Tom nodded slowly. "She cried until we went to check, and we found it bleeding on the porch. And 2 weeks later, when that bird hit our window, she did the same thing." Sarah looked up at Ranger Martinez. "She's always been connected to animals somehow. We didn't understand how deep it went." Lily had crawled over to the bear cub now, and was sitting face to face with it. To the adult's amazement, she placed one tiny hand on the cub's head in what looked remarkably like a comforting gesture. The cub remained perfectly still, accepting the touch. Then Lily turned and pointed again at the mother bear, making those strange rumbling sounds. "I think we need to try," Sarah said decisively. "If there's any chance she knows something we don't, it's too dangerous," Tom insisted. "That mother bear could charge the moment we get close, injured or not." Ranger Martinez was quiet for a moment, then said, "What if the cub and your daughter lead the way?" "Absolutely not," Tom said immediately. "Tom," Sarah put her hand on his arm, "look at them." Lily and the bear cub were now side by side, both looking toward the mother bear. There was something ancient and primal in the tableau they created. A human child and a bear cub, bridging a gap that had existed between their species for millennia. "I'll go first," Ranger Martinez offered. "Jake, get the medical kit from the truck. The real one, not just the first aid kit." "Helena, this is crazy," Jake protested. "Maybe, but I've never seen anything like this in 15 years of wildlife management, and I'm not going to ignore it. That bear needs help, and somehow this child knows it." Jake hesitated, then turned and jogged back toward the truck. "I'm coming too," Sarah said, standing up. "Sarah," Tom began. "She's our daughter, Tom. If she's going, I'm going." Tom closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "Then I'm coming too. We do this together." Ranger Martinez gave them a quick, approving nod. "Stay behind me, move slowly, and watch for any signs of aggression from the mother." Jake returned with a large green medical kit. "I still think this is insane, but if we're doing it, let's do it right." He pulled out a tranquilizer gun and tucked it into his belt. Just in case. They began moving toward the injured bear, walking at a painfully slow pace. Lily, still sitting next to the cub, watched them approach with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. Then, to everyone's amazement, she began to crawl toward her mother. Sarah instinctively moved to scoop her up, but Ranger Martinez put a hand on her arm. "Wait, watch." The bear cub followed Lily, staying close to her side. Together, the baby and the cub approached the injured mother bear, who watched them with pain-glazed eyes but made no aggressive moves. When they were about 10 feet from the mother bear, Lily stopped and sat up. She made a soft cooing sound, then looked back at the adults with an expression that clearly said, "Come on." "I can't believe what I'm seeing," Jake muttered, but he followed along with the others as they cautiously approached. The mother bear's eyes tracked their movement, but she remained still, focused primarily on her cub and, strangely, on Lily. The baby reached one hand toward the bear's injured side, then pulled it back and looked pointedly at Ranger Martinez's medical kit. "She wants us to treat the wound," the ranger said quietly. She knelt slowly, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening, and opened the medical kit. The bear watched warily but did not growl or show signs of charging. Her cub had nestled against her uninjured side, while Lily sat just beyond arm's reach, making those same rumbling sounds that seemed to keep the mother bear calm. "I need to clean the wound and possibly stitch it," Ranger Martinez said softly. "It's going to hurt her. If she charges, we grab Lily and run," Tom finished, his body tense and ready to move. Ranger Martinez nodded. With careful, practiced movements, she began cleaning the bear's wound. The animal flinched and let out a low moan but didn't move away or show aggression. Lily responded with a similar sound, leaning slightly forward as if encouraging the bear to endure the treatment. It was such a human gesture, so full of empathy and understanding, that Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "How is she doing this?" No one had an answer. They watched in silent amazement as Ranger Martinez worked on the bear's wound, applying antiseptic, stitching the deepest part of the gash, and finally covering it with a special wildlife bandage designed to fall off naturally once healing had begun. Throughout the procedure, Lily continued making those soothing sounds, occasionally reaching toward the cub or making eye contact with the mother bear. It was as if she was facilitating a complex communication between species that should have been impossible. When the treatment was complete, Ranger Martinez carefully packed up her supplies and backed away. "Now we leave her to rest," she said. "With the wound cleaned and stitched, her chances are much better." Tom reached down to pick up Lily, but to his surprise, she scooted away from his hands, moving closer to the bears. "Lily," he called softly, trying to keep the panic from his voice. "Come to Daddy." Lily looked at him, then at the bears, then back at him. She made a different sound now, almost like a question. The mother bear shifted slightly, nudging her cub with her nose. To the human's astonishment, the cub walked over to Lily and gently bumped her with its head, as if saying goodbye. Lily reached out and patted its fur once more, then finally raised her arms toward Tom. Relief flooded through him as he scooped up his daughter, holding her close to his chest. "That's enough adventure for one night, little one," he murmured against her hair. They backed away slowly, not turning their backs on the bears until they were a safe distance away. As they retreated, the mother bear raised her head and let out a low, rumbling call that wasn't aggressive but almost sounded grateful. Lily answered with a similar sound, then laid her head on Tom's shoulder, suddenly every bit the normal, tired baby. When they reached the vehicles, Jake let out a long, shaky breath. "In 15 years of ranger service, I've never seen anything like that. Never." Ranger Martinez was quiet, her expression thoughtful as she watched Lily, who was now dozing in Tom's arms. "There are old stories in these mountains," she said finally. "Legends from the indigenous tribes who lived here long before European settlers arrived." "What kind of legends?" Sarah asked, unable to take her eyes off her now peaceful daughter. "Stories of children born with the ability to speak to animals. They called them spirit bridges, humans whose souls could cross between worlds." Ranger Martinez leaned against her truck, suddenly looking tired. "My grandmother was Diné, Navajo. She used to tell me these stories when I was little. I always thought they were just that, stories." Tom and Sarah exchanged a look. "Our daughter isn't—" Tom began, but couldn't finish the sentence. Wasn't what? Normal? Human? He didn't even know what he was trying to say. "Your daughter is special," Ranger Martinez said firmly. "What that means, I don't know, but there's someone who might—" "Who?" Sarah asked. "My grandmother's sister, my great-aunt. She still lives on the reservation about 2 hours from here. She's an elder, a keeper of the old ways and stories." Ranger Martinez hesitated. "If you want answers, she might be able to help." Tom looked down at Lily, now sleeping peacefully in his arms, looking for all the world like an ordinary baby. But the events of the night had shattered any illusion of ordinariness. Their daughter had communicated with bears, had somehow known exactly how to save not just the cub, but its mother as well. Those weren't the actions of a normal 6-month-old child. "What do you think?" he asked Sarah softly. Sarah stroked Lily's cheek with one finger. "I think we need to understand what's happening to our daughter," she replied. "And I don't think conventional doctors are going to have the answers." Tom nodded slowly. "All right," he said to Ranger Martinez. "How do we meet this great-aunt of yours?" "I'll make a call," the ranger promised. "But first, let's all get some rest. It's been an unusual night, to say the least." Jake had been checking on the mother bear through binoculars. "She's settling in for the night," he reported. "Looks comfortable, all things considered. The cub is curled up against her." He lowered the binoculars and looked at Lily. "Whatever your daughter did, it worked. That bear let us help her when she should have tried to kill us all." They made arrangements to meet at the ranger station the following morning. Tom and Sarah would stay at a small motel in the nearby town rather than returning to their campsite. After exchanging contact information, they got into their car and began the drive back up the canyon road. Lily slept soundly in her car seat, looking peaceful and innocent, giving no indication of the extraordinary abilities she had displayed. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked quietly as they drove through the darkness. Tom was silent for a long moment. I don't know, he finally admitted. But whatever is happening with Lily, we'll face it together. She's still our daughter, Sarah. Nothing changes that. Sarah reached back and placed her hand on Lily's tiny foot. I always knew she was special from the moment she was born. I just didn't realize how special. As they drove, neither noticed the shadows moving alongside the road, dark shapes keeping pace with their car, following them up out of the canyon and into an uncertain future. Back at the river's edge, the mother bear raised her head, watching the retreating car lights. Beside her, her cub slept peacefully, but the bear's gaze remained fixed on the winding road long after the humans had disappeared from view. There was recognition in those dark eyes, an awareness that went beyond animal instinct. Something ancient had awakened in the canyon that night, something that had been sleeping for generations, waiting for a child like Lily to bring it back into the world. The morning dawned clear and bright, with no hint of the extraordinary events that had unfolded during the night. Sarah awoke first, immediately checking on Lily in the portable crib the motel had provided. The baby was still sleeping, her small chest rising and falling with each breath, one tiny hand curled against her cheek. She looked completely normal, just an ordinary baby having ordinary dreams. But Sarah couldn't shake the memory of those strange sounds Lily had made, the way she had looked directly into the eyes of a wild bear without fear, the impossible understanding that had passed between them. No 6-month-old should be capable of such things. No human of any age should be capable of such things. Tom stirred beside her, blinking in the sunlight streaming through the thin motel curtains. "How is she?" he asked immediately, his voice rough with sleep. "Still sleeping," Sarah replied. "She seems fine." Tom sat up, running a hand through his hair. "Last night really happened, didn't it? I keep thinking maybe it was some kind of shared hallucination or something." "It happened," Sarah confirmed. "Our daughter communicated with bears, Tom. She got them to trust us enough to let us treat a potentially fatal wound. That happened." Tom was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Are you afraid of her?" The question hung in the air between them, brutal in its honesty. Sarah started to deny it automatically, but stopped herself. Was she afraid? Not exactly. But there was a new awareness now, a recognition that the small person they had created was something more than they had understood. "I'm not afraid of Lily," she said finally. "I'm afraid for her. What does this mean for her life? How do we raise a child who can do whatever it is she did last night?" Tom nodded, understanding. "I guess we start by talking to this elder ranger Martinez mentioned. Maybe she can help us make sense of this." Their conversation was interrupted by a soft cooing from the portable crib. Lily was awake, chubby arms reaching up toward the ceiling, a smile lighting her face when she spotted her parents. Sarah went to her, lifting her from the crib. "Good morning, sweet girl," she murmured, searching her daughter's face for any sign of the strange intelligence she had displayed the night before. But Lily just gurgled happily and patted Sarah's cheek with one small hand, acting exactly like a normal 6-month-old should. "Maybe it was a one-time thing," Tom suggested, watching them. "Some kind of, I don't know, adrenaline response or something." Sarah wasn't convinced. "You didn't have those dreams when I was pregnant, Tom. I did. And they weren't normal pregnancy dreams. They were so vivid, so real. I could smell the earth, feel the wind in my fur." She stopped, embarrassed by how it sounded. "In your fur," Tom repeated, not mockingly, but with growing realization. "You were dreaming you were a bear." Sarah nodded. "Almost every night in the 3rd trimester, running through forests, fishing in streams, caring for cubs in a den. It felt like memories, not dreams. She hugged Lily closer. I think it started before she was even born, Tom. Whatever this is, it's been with her from the beginning." Tom was about to respond when a knock came at their motel room door. He opened it to find Ranger Martinez standing there, looking tired but determined. "Sorry to come so early," she said. "But I spoke with my great-aunt last night, and she's expecting us. It's a 2-hour drive to the reservation." "She agreed to see us, just like that?" Tom asked, surprised. Ranger Martinez's expression was unreadable. "When I told her what happened, she said she's been waiting for this day. She said the signs have been appearing for months." "Signs?" Sarah asked, a chill running down her spine despite the warm morning. "Signs in nature. Animals behaving strangely. Bears coming down from the higher elevations earlier than usual this year. Birds forming unusual patterns in the sky." Ranger Martinez shrugged slightly. "My great-aunt sees meaning in these things that most people would overlook." Tom and Sarah exchanged a look. It sounded like superstition, like the kind of folk beliefs that educated modern people were supposed to dismiss. But after what they had witnessed the night before, who were they to question it? "Let us get ready," Tom said. "We'll meet you out front in 30 minutes." While Sarah dressed Lily and packed the diaper bag, Tom took a quick shower, trying to clear his head. Under the spray of hot water, he found himself wondering how his life had changed so dramatically in less than 24 hours. Yesterday morning, they had been a normal family, setting out for a camping weekend. Now, they were about to drive to a reservation to consult with a tribal elder about their daughter's apparent ability to communicate with bears. Nothing in his life had prepared him for this. Not his practical Midwestern upbringing, not his engineering education, not his methodical approach to problems and solutions. There was no manual for raising a child who might be, what had Ranger Martinez called it, a spirit bridge. By the time they checked out of the motel and loaded their things into the car, Tom had made a decision. Whatever was happening with Lily, he would approach it with an open mind. His daughter needed him to be strong, to be accepting, to be her advocate in a world that might not understand her gifts. He could do that much, at least. They followed Ranger Martinez's truck out of the small town and onto the highway, heading east toward the reservation. Lily seemed content in her car seat, watching the scenery pass with bright, curious eyes. There was no sign of the strange behavior from the night before, but Tom and Sarah kept stealing glances at her in the rearview mirror, as if expecting her to suddenly start making bear sounds again. About an hour into the drive, Ranger Martinez pulled over at a scenic overlook. When they got out to stretch their legs, she pointed to a forested valley below them, where a river snaked through the trees. "That's Whispering Valley," she said. "According to the old stories, it's a place where the barriers between the human world and the animal world are thinnest. My great-aunt says that children like Lily, if that's what she is, were once common among our people. They were valued as mediators between humans and the natural world." "Were?" Sarah asked, holding Lily on her hip. "What happened to them?" Ranger Martinez's expression darkened. "The same thing that happened to so many indigenous traditions. They were suppressed, forgotten, or driven underground. Children who showed the signs were often taken away by government agencies or church schools." She looked at Lily. "The gift became rarer with each generation until it was just a story the elders told." "But you think Lily has this gift?" Tom asked. "After what I saw last night?" "Yes, and my great-aunt will be able to tell us more." They got back in their vehicles and continued the journey. The landscape gradually changed, becoming drier and more rugged. Mesas rose in the distance, their red stone catching the morning sun. The reservation appeared suddenly, a collection of modest homes, community buildings, and traditional structures spread across a valley. Ranger Martinez led them to a small house set apart from the others, with a garden of native plants surrounding it and smoke rising from a chimney despite the warm day. An elderly woman sat on the porch, her dark eyes bright and alert in a face mapped with deep wrinkles. Her silver hair was pulled back in a traditional bun, and she wore a long skirt and blouse adorned with intricate beadwork. She stood as they approached, her gaze immediately fixing on Lily. "You've brought her," she said, her voice stronger than her age might suggest. "The one who speaks to bears." Ranger Martinez stepped forward. "Great Aunt, this is Tom and Sarah Parker, and their daughter Lily. Tom, Sarah, this is my great aunt, Margaret B. Gay." Margaret nodded to them but kept her eyes on Lily. "Bring her closer," she requested. Sarah hesitated only briefly before walking up the porch steps. Lily, who was usually shy with strangers, showed no fear. She stared at the old woman with obvious curiosity. Margaret held out her arms. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, Sarah handed Lily to the elder. Margaret held the baby with practiced ease, looking deeply into her eyes. She spoke a few words in her native language, then smiled when Lily responded with a happy gurgle. "Yes," Margaret said, nodding. "She is one of them, a spirit bridge. We have not seen one for 3 generations." "What does that mean?" Tom asked, climbing the steps to join them. "What is happening to our daughter?" Margaret gestured for them all to sit. The porch had several comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. "It is not something happening to her," she corrected gently. "It is something she is, something she was born to be." As they settled into the chairs, Margaret, still holding Lily on her lap, the old woman began to explain. In the old days, before the Europeans came, each tribe had at least one spirit bridge, a person who could communicate with animals, who could understand their thoughts and make their needs known to the human tribe. They were essential to maintaining balance between our world and the natural world. "But how is it possible?" Sarah asked. "Scientifically, I mean." Margaret smiled patiently. "Your science is only beginning to understand what our ancestors knew, that all living things are connected, that consciousness takes many forms, that communication happens in ways beyond words." She looked down at Lily, who was contentedly playing with one of the colorful beads on Margaret's clothing. The spirit bridges were born with a different kind of mind, one that could perceive the thoughts and feelings of animals directly, not as words, but as impressions, emotions, images. "Like empathy?" Tom suggested. "Yes, but deeper, more direct. A true spirit bridge doesn't just sense what an animal is feeling. They can share thoughts with them, can make their own thoughts understood." "And you think Lily can do this?" Sarah said, still struggling to accept it. "I know she can. I felt it the moment I held her." Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. She reached for my mind, just as she must have reached for the bears' minds last night. Tom and Sarah exchanged a look. It sounded incredible, impossible. And yet, they had seen it with their own eyes, their baby daughter communicating with wild bears, somehow knowing they needed help, somehow convincing the mother bear to accept human intervention. "If this is true," Tom said carefully, "what does it mean for Lily's future?" Margaret's expression grew serious. "That depends on many things, on how you raise her, on whether she learns to use her gift wisely, on whether the modern world makes space for such ancient abilities." "Is she in danger?" Sarah asked, her protective instincts flaring. "Not from the gift itself, but the world can be unkind to those who are different." Margaret looked at Ranger Martinez. "Elena knows this." The ranger nodded, her expression somber. "When I was a child and spoke of hearing the birds talk to me, My teachers said I had an overactive imagination. When I was a teenager and claimed I could sense what animals were feeling, the other kids called me crazy. I learned to keep quiet about it. You have this gift, too? Tom asked, surprised. Not like Lily, just echoes of it. Enough to make me good at my job, to help me understand animal behavior better than most. But not enough to do what your daughter did last night. Margaret nodded. The gift has weakened in our family line, as it has in most, but in your daughter, it has returned in full strength. That is significant. Why her? Sarah asked. Neither Tom nor I have any Native American ancestry that we know of. The gift does not belong to any one people, Margaret explained. It has appeared in all cultures throughout history. The animal speakers, the beast masters, the feral children raised by wolves. Many legends contain a seed of this truth. Your daughter was chosen because the world needs spirit bridges now more than ever. Chosen by whom? Tom asked, a slight edge to his voice. Margaret smiled. By the great mystery some call God, others call the universe or nature, the source of all life. It is not for us to fully understand, only to honor. Tom wasn't entirely satisfied with this explanation, but he let it go for now. So, what do we do? How do we help Lily with this gift? First, you must accept it as real, Margaret said firmly. Do not doubt what you have seen. Do not try to explain it away or suppress it. We wouldn't do that, Sarah said quickly. Many would, Margaret replied, out of fear or disbelief. She looked at them appraisingly. But I think you are wise enough to accept what is before you. She shifted Lily on her lap, turning the baby to face her. Second, you must help her learn to control her gift. A spirit bridge who cannot control when and how they connect with animals can become overwhelmed, lost between worlds. How do we do that? Tom asked. She's just a baby. She will grow, Margaret said simply. And as she grows, her abilities will develop. There are exercises, techniques that can help. I can teach you. You would do that? Sarah asked. It is my responsibility. Those of us who remember the old ways must pass them on. Margaret's eyes crinkled at the corners. Besides, I have been waiting a long time to meet another true spirit bridge. She handed Lily back to Sarah, then struggled to her feet. Age seemed to catch up with her as she moved, making her steps slow and careful. Come inside. There is much to discuss, and stories to tell that should be shared over food. As they followed her into the house, Tom whispered to Sarah, Do you believe all this? Spirit bridges and ancient gifts? Sarah looked down at Lily, who was watching a butterfly flit past the porch with unusual intensity in her baby blue eyes. After what we saw last night, I'm trying to keep an open mind. The inside of Margaret's house was warm and filled with the scent of herbs and cooking food. Traditional weavings hung on the walls alongside modern photographs. A fire burned in a central hearth, with a pot of something savory-smelling suspended above it. As they settled at a round table, Lily began to fuss. It started as ordinary baby whimpering but quickly transformed into those eerily bear-like sounds they had heard the night before. Margaret went still, listening intently. She senses something, the old woman said quietly. A moment later, they heard it too, a scratching at the door. Margaret nodded to Ranger Martinez, who cautiously approached and opened it. There, sitting on the doorstep as if it belonged there, was the bear cub from the canyon. "Oh my God," Tom breathed, instinctively moving toward Sarah and Lily. But Lily wasn't afraid. She squirmed excitedly in Sarah's arms, making those rumbling sounds again. The cub responded with a similar noise, taking a tentative step inside. "How did it find us?" Sarah whispered. "We're hours from the canyon." Margaret's eyes shone with wonder. "It followed her call," she said simply. The bond has already been established. Ranger Martinez stood frozen by the door, her professional training warring with the impossible scene unfolding before her. The mother bear, she must be nearby. As if summoned by the words, a shadow fell across the doorway. The massive form of the mother bear appeared, standing upright, her injured side showing the bandage from the night before. She filled the doorframe, her presence commanding and terrifying. Tom grabbed Sarah's arm. "We need to get out of here." But Margaret raised her hand. "Be still," she commanded. "Watch." The mother bear lowered herself to all fours and stepped cautiously into the house, her eyes fixed on Lily. There was intelligence in that gaze, recognition, purpose. Lily babbled excitedly, reaching toward the bear with both hands. Sarah held her tightly, heart pounding, caught between maternal protection and the growing sense that she was witnessing something profound. The bear approached slowly. When she was just feet away, she lowered herself to the ground in a gesture that looked remarkably like a boo. She placed something on the floor before them, a small glittering object that caught the firelight. "She has brought a gift," Margaret said, her voice filled with awe. "This has not happened in my lifetime." The object was a crystal, perfectly formed and clear as glass, a rare mineral formation from deep in the canyon. The bear nudged it toward Lily with her nose. Margaret moved forward slowly and picked up the crystal. "This is a power stone," she explained. "In our tradition, such stones hold energy that can strengthen a spirit bridge's abilities." She looked at the bear with deep respect. "She knows what your daughter is." The bear made a soft huffing sound, then backed away, pausing to nudge her cub toward the door. At the threshold, she turned once more to look at Lily, something like understanding passing between them. Then she disappeared into the bright day, her cub following close behind. No one spoke for several long moments. The room felt charged with energy, as if reality itself had shifted around them. Finally, Tom found his voice. "I don't understand. Why would a wild bear bring a crystal to our daughter?" Margaret smiled as she placed the crystal in Lily's tiny hands. The baby examined it with unusual focus, turning it to catch the light. "Because your daughter is not just any spirit bridge," the old woman said. "The signs I have seen, the timing of her birth, the strength of her abilities even as an infant, all point to something the prophecies spoke of." "What prophecies?" Sarah asked, still watching the doorway where the bears had been. "There is an old story among many tribes," Margaret said, returning to her seat. "It speaks of a time when the human world and the natural world would become dangerously separated, when humans would forget their place in the great web of life, threatening all creation." She looked at Lily with reverence. "The prophecy said that in this time of great need, a powerful spirit bridge would be born, one who could speak not just to one kind of animal, but to many, one who could help restore the broken harmony between humans and the natural world." Ranger Martinez sat down heavily. "You think Lily is this prophesied one?" "I have lived many years waiting and watching for the signs," Margaret said. "The unusual migration patterns, the animals appearing where they should not be, the dreams reported by those sensitive to such things." She nodded toward Sarah. "Like the bear dreams that came to you during pregnancy." Sarah hugged Lily closer. "But she's just a baby. How could she possibly restore harmony between humans and nature?" "She will grow," Margaret said simply. "And as she grows, her gift will develop. It begins with bears, but it will not end there." She gazed into the fire. "The prophecy speaks of a circle of guardians, animal protectors who will recognize the bridge maker and help prepare the way." "The mother bear," Tom said slowly. That's why she let us help her, why she brought the crystal. Margaret nodded. She is the first guardian. Others will come as Lily grows. The implications were overwhelming. Their daughter, their tiny, vulnerable baby, carried a responsibility none of them fully understood. A gift that could make her a target of fear or exploitation, but also a gift the world desperately needed. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, voicing the question foremost in both parents' minds. Margaret reached out and laid her weathered hand on Lily's head. "You raise her with love. You teach her to honor her gift. You protect her while she learns." The old woman's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "And when the time is right, you let her fulfill her purpose." "We can't possibly do this alone," Tom said, the enormity of it all finally hitting him. "You won't be alone," Ranger Martinez promised. "I'll help however I can. And I will teach you what I know," Margaret added. "There are others, too, elders from various tribes who have kept the old knowledge. Together, we will guide her." Sarah looked down at Lily, who was still examining the crystal with that strange, focused intelligence. "Do you hear that, sweet girl? You've got quite a journey ahead of you." Lily looked up at her mother and smiled, a smile that somehow seemed older and wiser than her 6 months on Earth. She made a soft cooing sound and touched Sarah's cheek with her tiny hand. In that touch, Sarah suddenly felt what her daughter experienced, a flash of connection to everything around her, the warmth of the fire, the wisdom of Margaret, the lingering presence of the bears, the love of her parents. For one breathtaking moment, Sarah saw the world through her daughter's eyes, a world where everything was connected, where boundaries between species were thin as gossamer, where communication flowed like water between all living things. The vision faded, leaving Sarah gasping. "I felt it," she whispered. "Just for a second, I felt what she feels." Margaret nodded. "She shared her gift with you. It is her way of telling you not to be afraid." Tom looked from his wife to his daughter, sensing something profound had passed between them. "Sarah? Are you okay?" Sarah wiped away tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. "I'm better than okay," she said. "I understand now. Not everything, but enough." She looked at Margaret. "We'll do whatever it takes to help her." "Then let us begin," the old woman said, rising from her chair. "There is much to learn, and time grows short." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the scents of pine and sage and distant rain. Somewhere in the forest, a bear and her cub made their way home, having completed the first part of an ancient promise. Above, birds wheeled in formations that told stories to those who knew how to read them. And deep in the canyon where it all began, other animals raised their heads, sensing a shift in the world, the awakening of a bridge between realms. In a small house on the reservation, a baby girl held a crystal up to the light, giggling as it cast rainbows across the walls. She didn't yet understand what she was or what she would become. She knew only the love that surrounded her and the call of something wild and wonderful that sang in her blood. Lily Parker, daughter, Spirit Bridge, hope for a broken world. Some called it destiny. Others called it evolution. Her parents called it a miracle. In time, the world would call it salvation. 10 years later, a young girl stood at the edge of the same canyon where her story had begun. Her blonde hair caught the sunlight, and a crystal hung from a leather cord around her neck. Beside her stood a massive grizzly bear, its graying muzzle testament to the years that had passed. "Are you ready?" Lily asked, her voice carrying on the wind. The bear rumbled a response that only she could fully understand. Behind them, a line of animals stretched back into the forest. Wolves and eagles, deer, and mountain lions, creatures that should have been enemies but stood in peaceful proximity under the watchful eye of the spirit bridge. At the forest's edge, a group of humans waited, her parents now older and wiser, Ranger Martinez with streaks of silver in her hair, elders from a dozen tribes, scientists and government officials who had come to witness what many still could not believe. Lily took a deep breath and raised her hands. The crystal at her neck pulsed with inner light. "It's time," she said, to both the animals and the humans. "Today, we begin to heal the divide." And with those words, the impossible dialogue began. Between species that had never truly spoken, between humans who had forgotten how to listen, between a world of steel and concrete and a world of fur and feather and scale. The prophecy had come true. The bridge was open, and nothing would ever be the same again.